The crystal chandeliers cast their golden glow across Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala. But beneath the champagne toasts and designer gowns, a decade-old murder was about to surface. When a janitor with calloused hands asked the blind heiress to dance, he unknowingly triggered the first crack in an empire built on lies and blood. What happened next would shatter the Harrington dynasty forever. Stay with me until the end, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The Harrington Foundation. Annual Gala was never just a party. It was theater. It was warfare conducted with seven-figure checks and carefully practiced smiles. It was where Manhattan's elite gathered once a year to congratulate themselves on their generosity, while their drivers idled outside in cars worth more than most people's homes. Victor Harrington understood this better than anyone. He'd built his empire on understanding what people wanted to believe about themselves, then selling it back to them at a premium. Tonight, like every year, he would stand at that podium and deliver his carefully crafted performance, his voice breaking at precisely the right moment as he spoke about his late wife, Catherine. He would gesture toward his daughter, Isabella, seated alone in her designated spot like a museum piece, and the crowd would dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs that cost more than a week's groceries. They would write their checks. They would feel good about themselves. And Victor would add another floor to his empire of carefully constructed lies. But empires, no matter how carefully constructed, always have cracks. Caleb Rose saw those cracks. It was his job to see them. The scuff marks on marble floors, the champagne stains on silk tablecloths, the human debris left behind after the wealthy had their fun. He'd been cleaning this ballroom for 5 years now, ever since his wife died, and he'd needed a night job to supplement his day work at the construction site. His daughter Maya was 12 now, smart as a whip, and already talking about MIT. He was working himself to the bone to make sure she got there. Tonight, he was supposed to be invisible. That was the first rule of janitorial work at events like this. Blend into the wallpaper, become part of the furniture, exist without existing. He'd gotten good at it over the years, moving through the crowd with his cart, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, all while remaining completely beneath the notice of people who wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, he couldn't stop watching the girl in the corner. Isabella Harrington sat in her designated chair like a prisoner in an invisible cell. She was 24 years old, though the way people spoke about her, in hushed, pitying tones, made her sound like a tragic child frozen in time. She wore a deep emerald gown that probably cost more than Caleb's car, her dark hair swept up in an elegant style that exposed the slender column of her neck. She was beautiful in the way that old paintings were beautiful, untouchable, remote, preserved behind glass. But it was her stillness that struck Caleb most. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something no one else could hear. Her eyes, clouded by the blindness that had claimed her the night of the accident, stared at nothing and everything. She didn't fidget. She didn't shift. She barely seemed to breathe. She looked, Caleb thought, like someone who had learned to make herself as small as possible, like someone who had discovered that the less space you took up, the less you could be hurt. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror during the year after Sarah died, when he'd been sleepwalking through life, going through the motions of existence without actually living. It had taken Maya's small hand slipping into his one morning, her voice saying, "Daddy, you're still here, right? You're not going to leave like Mommy did." To wake him up, to remind him that he had a reason to fight his way back to the surface. Isabella Harrington looked like someone still underwater, still drowning, still waiting for someone to notice she needed saving. "Poor thing," one of the servers murmured as she passed Caleb's station near the kitchen entrance. 10 years in the dark. Can you imagine? "I heard she still blames herself," another server whispered back, "for the crash, for killing her mother." "Well, she was driving. She was 14 years old, Rita. 14, and it was raining, and the road was slick. Still, her own mother." Caleb's jaw tightened. He focused on wiping down the already spotless counter, keeping his eyes down, his expression neutral. But his hands moved a little too forcefully, the cloth making sharp, angry sounds against the marble. It wasn't his business. He was here to clean, to collect his paycheck, to go home to Maya and make sure she had everything she needed. He wasn't here to play hero or to get involved in the complicated tragedies of people who lived in a different stratosphere. But God, the way they talked about her, like she was already dead, like she was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a tragedy to be trotted out once a year for Victor Harrington's benefit. The orchestra began warming up, the sound of strings and brass cutting through the conversation. Caleb glanced at his watch. 9:15. The dancing would start soon, which meant the real work would begin. Spilled drinks, dropped canapes, the inevitable mess that followed whenever this many wealthy people tried to move gracefully after several glasses of champagne. He positioned his cart near the edge of the ballroom, close enough to be available but far enough to stay out of the way. From this angle, he had a clear view of the entire space. The glittering crowd, the elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than his monthly rent, the small stage where Victor Harrington was making his way to the podium, and Isabella, still sitting alone in her designated corner, her hands folded, her face carefully blank. Victor Harrington was a master of the microphone. His voice carried perfectly across the ballroom, warm and resonant, with just the right hint of gravitas. He stood tall and distinguished in his custom tuxedo, silver threading through his dark hair in a way that magazines called distinguished and commanding. At 56, he'd maintained the athletic build of his youth, the sharp jawline, the piercing blue eyes that could cut through a boardroom or charm a camera crew with equal facility. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, and the crowd quieted instantly. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Your generosity continues to humble me year after year." Caleb watched Isabella's face as her father spoke. She'd gone even stiller, if that was possible, her shoulders rigid beneath the silk of her gown. "As many of you know," Victor continued, his voice taking on that careful, rehearsed note of emotion, "the Harrington Foundation was established in memory of my late wife, Catherine. 10 years ago this spring, we lost her in a tragic accident that changed our family forever." A ripple of sympathetic murmurs moved through the crowd. Several people glanced toward Isabella, their expressions ranging from pity to uncomfortable curiosity. "Catherine was passionate about arts education for underprivileged youth," Victor said. "She believed that every child, regardless of their circumstances, deserved access to music, to art, to beauty. This foundation is my way of keeping her dream alive, of ensuring that her light continues to shine in the world." It was a beautiful speech. Caleb could see people reaching for their phones, no doubt ready to increase their donations. Victor Harrington knew exactly how to play his audience, exactly which emotional chords to strike. But from where Caleb stood, he could see what the rest of the crowd couldn't. He could see the slight tremor in Isabella's hands. He could see the way her throat moved as she swallowed. He could see the muscle jumping in her jaw as she fought to keep her face composed. She looked like someone being forced to swallow poison while everyone applauded. "My daughter, Isabella," Victor said, gesturing toward her with a sweep of his hand, "has been so brave through these difficult years. She is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure, to persevere, to find meaning even in the darkest of circumstances." Caleb felt his stomach turn. The way Victor said it, like Isabella was a trophy, a prop in his carefully constructed narrative. Not a person, not his daughter. Just another tool for generating sympathy and opening checkbooks. Isabella's face remained perfectly still, but Caleb saw her fingers dig into her palms, the knuckles going white. "So please," Victor concluded, his voice swelling with practiced emotion, "join me in honoring Catherine's memory by supporting the Foundation's work. Together we can ensure that her legacy lives on, that beauty and art continue to flourish, that hope continues to—" The sound of shattering glass cut through his speech like a gunshot. Every head in the room swiveled toward the source of the noise. One of the servers had dropped a tray of champagne flutes, the crystal exploding across the marble floor in a spectacular spray of glass and golden liquid. "I'm so sorry," the server gasped, her face flushing crimson. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrington, It's quite all right," Victor said smoothly, though Caleb could see the flash of irritation in his eyes. "These things happen. Let's have that cleaned up, shall we?" Caleb was already moving, grabbing his supplies and heading toward the mess. This was his job, to make problems disappear, to restore order, to clean up the evidence that anything had ever gone wrong. As he knelt to sweep up the glass, He was acutely aware of the crowd's eyes on him, though most slid past without really seeing. He was part of the help, after all. Invisible labor, necessary but unworthy of actual acknowledgement. Except when he glanced up, just for a moment, he found Isabella's sightless eyes pointed directly at him. It was impossible, he knew. She couldn't see him, she couldn't see anything. But something about her expression, the slight tilt of her head, the way her shoulders had lost some of their rigidity, made him feel like she'd heard the glass break and had followed the sound, had somehow locked onto his position with the precision of radar. And for just a moment, her lips curved in the smallest, saddest smile he'd ever seen. It was gone in an instant, her face smoothing back into its careful mask. But Caleb had seen it, that momentary crack in her armor, and it hit him like a physical blow. She was still in there. Behind the blank expression and the careful stillness and the practiced role of tragic victim, Isabella Harrington was still fighting, still present, still alive. She was just very, very good at hiding it. Caleb finished cleaning the glass and retreated to his position at the edge of the ballroom. Victor had concluded his speech and was now working the crowd, shaking hands, and accepting congratulations with the ease of a born politician. The orchestra had begun playing in earnest now, a waltz that had couples moving toward the dance floor. Isabella remained in her chair, alone, untouched. Caleb watched as the dancing began, the swirl of expensive fabric and glittering jewelry creating a kaleidoscope of color and motion. He thought about Maya, who loved to dance, who would put on her mother's old records and spin around their tiny living room until she was dizzy and laughing. Sarah had taught her that, in those last months before the cancer took her, spending her precious remaining energy teaching their daughter to find joy in movement and music. "Never stop dancing, baby girl," Sarah had whispered to Maya during one of their last good days. "No matter what happens, you keep dancing. Promise me." Maya had promised, and she'd kept that promise, even through the grief, even through the hard days. She danced. Looking at Isabella now, trapped in her designated corner while music swirled around her, Caleb felt something shift in his chest. It was probably stupid. It was definitely dangerous, for his job, for his carefully maintained invisibility. But he found himself thinking about Sarah's words, about the importance of dancing, about the difference between existing and living. He thought about what his wife would have done if she'd seen someone drowning in plain sight while everyone else just waltzed past. She would have thrown them a lifeline, every single time. Before he could talk himself out of it, before his rational mind could list all the reasons this was a terrible idea, Caleb set down his cleaning supplies and started walking across the ballroom floor. He was aware of eyes turning toward him, of curious and confused expressions, of whispered comments that he deliberately didn't try to hear. He kept his focus on Isabella, on the girl sitting alone while an entire room full of people celebrated around her. When he reached her chair, he stopped. Up close, he could see the details that distance had hidden, the shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal, the tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing was carefully controlled, like someone trying very hard not to hyperventilate. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Isabella's head turned toward the sound of his voice, her clouded eyes searching in his direction. She didn't speak, but her expression shifted slightly, confusion replacing the careful blankness. Caleb could feel the weight of the entire ballroom watching them now. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. But he'd started this, and he was going to finish it. "My name is Caleb," he said. "I'm nobody important. I'm just the guy who mops the floors here. But I was wondering—" He paused, swallowed, then pushed forward. "Would you like to dance?" The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb was aware of the music continuing to play, of the other dancers slowing and stopping, of hundreds of eyes fixed on this bizarre tableau. He could practically hear the shocked thoughts. "Who does he think he is? That's Victor Harrington's daughter. That's the help, for God's sake." But Isabella looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her lips parted slightly, her hands unclenched in her lap. And for a long moment, she just sat there, frozen, as if his question had short-circuited something fundamental in her understanding of how the world worked. She started, then stopped. Her voice was soft, unused, like an instrument that hadn't been played in years. "You don't have to," Caleb said quickly. "I just thought, What had he thought? He didn't even know anymore. I just thought it seemed wrong for you to sit here while everyone else dances, that's all. Isabella's throat moved as she swallowed. Her fingers twisted in her lap, the first truly spontaneous movement he'd seen from her all evening. I can't see, she said, and there was something almost like an apology in her voice. I can't. I wouldn't know how to... That's okay, Caleb said. I can see for both of us. I'm not much of a dancer anyway, so we'd probably both be fumbling around out there together. But if you wanted to try, if you wanted to just stand up and move for a minute, I'd be honored to help you do that. He could see her considering it, could see the war playing out across her face. Fear and longing, desire and terror. The desperate want to say yes battling against years of conditioning that had taught her to stay small, stay safe, stay in her designated corner. Miss Harrington, a cold voice cut through the moment like a knife. I don't believe you've met our janitor before. Victor Harrington materialized at his daughter's side, his hand dropping possessively onto her shoulder. His smile was perfectly pleasant, perfectly calibrated for their audience, but his eyes were arctic. Mr. Rowe, isn't it? Victor said, and the fact that he knew Caleb's name was not a good sign. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm afraid my daughter isn't up for dancing tonight. Or any night, really. It's one of her limitations. The word hung in the air like a slap. Limitations. Caleb saw Isabella flinch, saw her shoulders hunch inward, saw her retreating back into her shell like a creature that had extended itself too far and gotten burned. I understand, Caleb said, keeping his voice level. I apologize if I overstepped. Not at all, Victor said, his smile never wavering. You meant well, I'm sure. But perhaps it's best if you return to your duties. I believe there are some spills near the bar that need attention. It was a dismissal, clear, unambiguous, and absolutely final. Caleb met Victor's eyes for a long moment, seeing the warning there, the threat. Then he looked at Isabella, at her hunched shoulders and bowed head, at the way she'd folded back into herself like a flower closing against the cold. He should walk away. He should apologize again, return to his cart, finish his shift, and forget this whole thing ever happened. He had a daughter to feed, rent to pay, a life that couldn't afford the complications that came from challenging men like Victor Harrington. But then Isabella lifted her head slightly, and though her eyes couldn't see him, though she couldn't possibly know he was still looking at her, she whispered something so quietly that only he and Victor could hear it. I would have liked to dance. The words hit Caleb like a punch to the chest. The resignation in them, the grief, the acceptance of a life lived in shadows while everyone else moved in the light. It was unbearable. Victor's hand tightened on Isabella's shoulder, his fingers digging in just slightly, just enough for her to feel the warning. My daughter doesn't know what she wants, Victor said smoothly. She hasn't been well lately. The anniversary coming up, it's always a difficult time, I'm sure you understand. Caleb looked at Isabella's face, at the way she'd gone completely still again under her father's grip, at the resignation settling over her features like a funeral shroud. He thought about Maya, about all the times he'd told her to be brave, to stand up for herself, to not let anyone make her feel small. He thought about how hollow those words would be if she ever caught him walking away from someone who needed help just because it was inconvenient or dangerous. He thought about Sarah, about her last words to their daughter. Keep dancing. No matter what happens, keep dancing. With respect, sir, Caleb heard himself saying, I think maybe she does know what she wants. I think maybe nobody's asked her in a long time. The temperature in the immediate vicinity dropped about 20 degrees. Victor's smile finally slipped, his expression hardening into something cold and sharp and dangerous. Mr. Rowe, he said quietly, you are one comment away from losing your job. I suggest you think very carefully about your next words. Caleb felt his pulse hammering in his ears. He thought about Maya, about the MIT fund he'd been slowly building, about the electricity bill due next week, and the car that needed new brakes. He thought about all the very practical, very real consequences of pushing this any further. Then he looked at Isabella again, at her bowed head and hunched shoulders and carefully managed breathing, and he thought, to hell with it. One dance, he said quietly. That's all I'm asking for. One dance. Then I'll go back to my cart and you'll never hear from me again. But she deserves that much, doesn't she? One dance in a room full of people dancing? She deserves, Victor said, his voice like ice, to be protected from people who don't understand her condition, her limitations, her needs. I understand that she's a person, Caleb interrupted, and damn the consequences now. I understand that she's sitting here alone while everyone else is living their lives. I understand that maybe, just maybe, she deserves the chance to be something other than a tragic story you trot out once a year to make people cry. The words hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. Caleb saw Victor's mask crack completely, saw real fury flash across his face, saw his hand tighten on Isabella's shoulder hard enough to make her wince. And then Isabella spoke. "Daddy," she said quietly, and there was something new in her voice now, something that hadn't been there before. "I want to dance." Victor froze. His grip on her shoulder didn't loosen, but Caleb saw something flicker across his face, surprise, anger, and beneath it all something that looked almost like fear. "Isabella, please," she said, and now she was turning her face up toward where she knew her father stood, her blind eyes earnest and desperate. "Just one dance, just once. I want to try." The entire ballroom was watching now. The whispers had stopped. The music had faded to background noise. Every eye was locked on this tableau. The powerful CEO, his blind daughter, and the janitor who dared to interrupt the evening's carefully orchestrated performance. Victor's face worked through several expressions before settling back into something resembling his public mask. But Caleb could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, could see him weighing options, considering consequences, thinking about what would play better to their audience, allowing the dance or refusing it. Finally, slowly, he released Isabella's shoulder. "One dance," he said coldly, and though the words were directed at Caleb, his eyes never left his daughter's face. "Then Mr. Rowe returns to his work, and we speak no more of this. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "Isabella?" Victor prompted, his voice sharp. "Yes, Daddy," Isabella whispered. "Good." Victor stepped back, his smile returning like a mask snapping into place. "Enjoy your dance, sweetheart. I'll be right here watching." The last word carried its own weight of warning, but Isabella was already rising from her chair, her movements uncertain, her hand reaching out tentatively into the space in front of her. Caleb stepped forward and gently took her hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, and impossibly delicate in his calloused palm. "I've got you," he said quietly. "Just follow my lead, okay?" Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. Together, they moved toward the center of the dance floor. The other couples had all stopped dancing now, moving aside to create space, their expressions ranging from fascination to disapproval to uncomfortable pity. The orchestra, after a moment of confused silence, began playing again. A waltz, slow and gentle and achingly beautiful. Caleb had learned to dance from Sarah in their tiny apartment kitchen, with her laughing and guiding his clumsy feet through the basic steps. He wasn't graceful and he wasn't smooth, but he knew enough to lead, to count the beats, to provide a steady anchor for someone to follow. "Okay," he said softly, placing his hand carefully at Isabella's waist, trying not to think about how many people were watching, how expensive her dress was, how this was possibly the most surreal moment of his entire life. "Right hand in mine, left hand on my shoulder. That's it. Now, the basic waltz is just a box step. 3 beats. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Forward on 1, side on 2, together on 3. Then back, side, together. Can you feel the rhythm?" Isabella's breath was coming fast and shallow, her body rigid with tension, but she nodded, her fingers tightening on his shoulder. "Good," Caleb said. "Just listen to the music. Feel how it moves. I'll guide you. I won't let you fall, I promise. Ready?" Another nod. Her face was turned slightly upward, her eyes searching in his direction even though they couldn't see, and there was something achingly vulnerable in her expression. 1, 2, 3, Caleb counted quietly. 1, 2, 3. They began to move. It was awkward at first. Isabella stumbled, her feet unsure, her body stiff with fear and decades of learned helplessness. But Caleb kept his grip steady, his voice low and reassuring as he counted out the steps, guiding her through the basic pattern. "That's it," he murmured. "You're doing great. Forward, side, together, back, side, together. Feel how the music moves? It's like breathing, in and out, forward and back." Slowly, incrementally, he felt Isabella begin to relax. Her breathing evened out. Her feet found the rhythm. Her body started to remember something it had forgotten: how to move with confidence, how to trust, how to let go. "I used to dance," she whispered suddenly, so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Before the accident, my mother taught me. We would dance in our living room, just the two of us, to old records. Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and—" Her voice broke. Caleb felt her stumble, felt her start to pull away, retreating back into herself. "Hey," he said gently. "Stay with me. Don't go back there yet. Feel the music. Feel how you're moving. You're dancing, Isabella. Right now, in this moment, you're dancing." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in slightly, letting him take more of her weight, trusting him to guide her through the steps. "I can't see where we're going," she whispered. "That's okay," Caleb said. "I can see for both of us. Just trust me." And incredibly, impossibly, she did. They moved across the dance floor, and with each step, Caleb felt something shift in Isabella's body. The tension bled away. Her movements became smoother, more confident. She stopped trying to anticipate every step and just let herself feel the music. Let herself be guided. Let herself remember what it felt like to move freely through space. From the sidelines, Caleb could see Victor watching, his expression unreadable, but his body language radiating displeasure. He could see the crowd watching too, whispers starting up again, phones being lifted to capture this strange moment. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the woman in his arms, who was slowly, tentatively, beginning to smile. Really smile. Not the careful, practiced expression she'd worn earlier, but something genuine and bright and utterly heartbreaking in its rarity. "The music," Isabella said suddenly. "This song. I know this song." Caleb listened, trying to place the melody. It was beautiful, melancholy and sweet, and achingly romantic in that particular way that only old waltzes could be. "My parents," Isabella's voice caught. "They used to dance to this, at home. I remember watching them before—" She stopped again, her brow furrowing as if trying to capture a memory that kept slipping away. "The night of the accident. This was playing on the car radio. I remember hearing it, and they were fighting, and the rain—" She stopped moving abruptly, her body going rigid again. "Isabella?" Caleb said. "What is it? What's wrong?" But Isabella wasn't listening anymore. Her face had gone pale, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She looked like someone on the edge of a panic attack, or a revelation, or both. "They were fighting," she whispered. "About me. About sending me away. My father wanted— He said I was getting too close to, but my mother said no. She wouldn't allow it. I was her daughter, and she would protect—" She swayed suddenly, her knees buckling. Caleb caught her, holding her upright as she pressed a hand to her temple. I don't remember. It's all mixed up. But something about that night, something I'm not supposed to—" "That's enough." Victor's voice cut through Isabella's confused whisper like a blade. He was suddenly there, his hand clamping down on his daughter's arm, pulling her away from Caleb with a force that was just barely controlled. "The dance is over," he said coldly. "Isabella needs to rest. She's clearly overwhelmed." "I'm fine," Isabella protested, but her voice was weak, and she was trembling from head to foot. I was remembering something." "You're overtired," Victor said firmly, already steering her away from the dance floor. "Too much excitement. Come, sweetheart, let's get you somewhere quiet." Caleb watched helplessly as Victor guided Isabella toward a side door, his hand tight on her arm, his body language possessive and controlling. Isabella looked back once, her face confused and frightened, reaching toward where she thought Caleb might still be standing. Then they were gone, disappearing through the door and leaving Caleb alone on the dance floor with hundreds of staring eyes. The whispers started immediately. a rising tide of scandalized commentary. Caleb heard fragments as he made his way back to his cart. Can you believe the nerve? That poor girl. Completely inappropriate. His hands were shaking as he gripped the cart handle. His heart was racing. He'd just done something incredibly stupid, something that would probably cost him this job, and maybe any other jobs in this building. He'd challenged Victor Harrington in front of Manhattan's elite, and men like that didn't forget challenges. But he'd also seen Isabella smile. Really, genuinely smile. And he'd heard what she said about that night, about her parents fighting, about remembering something she wasn't supposed to remember. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, expecting his supervisor already calling to fire him. Instead, it was a text from Maya. Dad, when are you coming home? I want to show you my science project. Caleb closed his eyes, letting his daughter's innocent enthusiasm wash over him like cold water. This was real. This was what mattered. Not charity galas and blind heiresses and corporate empires built on secrets. He had a job to finish and a daughter waiting at home. But as he returned to his duties, cleaning and straightening and playing his role as invisible labor, he couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's face when she said those words. I would have liked to dance. And he couldn't stop thinking about how, for just a few moments, she had. Across the ballroom, through a side door, in a private room away from curious eyes, Victor Harrington helped his daughter into a chair and then locked the door behind them. What, he said quietly, did you think you were doing out there? Isabella's hands were shaking in her lap. I just wanted to dance, that's all. He asked, and I wanted, you wanted, Victor interrupted, his voice like ice, to make a spectacle of yourself, to embarrass me in front of our guests, to dance with the help while everyone watched and whispered and judged. It was just one dance. It was a mistake, Victor said flatly, and you will not repeat it. Do you understand me, Isabella? You will not speak to that man again. You will not acknowledge him if you see him. You will forget this entire ridiculous incident ever happened. Isabella's jaw tightened. For a moment she looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders slumped, the brief spark of defiance dying as quickly as it had appeared. Yes, Daddy, she whispered. Good. Victor's voice softened slightly, becoming almost gentle. I know you think I'm being harsh, sweetheart, but I'm protecting you. The world out there, it's not kind to people like you. That man, he doesn't understand what you've been through, what you're dealing with. He sees you as a novelty, a curiosity. He doesn't actually care about you. He was kind, Isabella said quietly. He was inappropriate, Victor corrected. And if you can't see the difference, that just proves how much you need my guidance, how much you need me to keep you safe. Isabella didn't respond. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank once more. But inside her mind, in a place her father couldn't see or control, something was stirring. A memory, fragmented and unclear, of rain and music and her parents' voices raised in anger. And a question, small but persistent, that she couldn't quite make go away. What exactly was she not supposed to remember? The memory came to Isabella in fragments over the following days, like pieces of a shattered mirror reflecting something she wasn't supposed to see. She would be sitting in her room, listening to an audiobook, or running her fingers over the braille pages of a novel, and suddenly she'd be back in that car, rain hammering the windshield, her mother's voice sharp, with an emotion Isabella had been too young to fully understand. You can't do this, Victor. She's 14 years old. She's our daughter. She's becoming a problem, Catherine. You've seen how she looks at me lately, like she knows, like she suspects. Suspects what? My God, what have you done? The memory would fragment there, dissolving into the sound of tires on wet pavement, the sudden lurch of the car, her mother's scream. And then nothing. Just darkness and the smell of blood and airbag powder and gasoline. Isabella pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to force the memories into some coherent shape. But they remained stubbornly elusive, there and not there, like trying to catch smoke with her bare hands. It had been 3 days since the gala. 3 days since she'd danced with the janitor whose name her father had forbidden her to speak. 3 days since she'd felt, for just a few brief moments, like something other than a tragic ornament in her father's carefully curated life. 3 days, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. The door to her suite opened without warning. Isabella didn't flinch. She'd learned years ago to expect her father's intrusions, to accept that privacy was just another thing the accident had taken from her. "Good morning, sweetheart," Victor said, his voice carrying that particular tone of forced cheer that always set Isabella's teeth on edge. "How are you feeling today?" "Fine," Isabella said quietly, her hands still in her lap, her face carefully neutral. "I have good news. Dr. Brennan has agreed to increase your sessions to 3 times a week. I think it will be beneficial, especially given your recent episode at the gala." Isabella felt her stomach clench. Dr. Brennan was the therapist her father had hired 6 years ago, a stern woman who seemed more interested in managing Isabella's behavior than actually helping her heal. Their sessions were exercises in careful navigation. Isabella had learned quickly what she was and wasn't allowed to say, what thoughts and feelings were acceptable, and which would result in concerned looks and medication adjustments. "That's not necessary," Isabella said. "I'm fine." "You had a panic attack on the dance floor," Victor said firmly, "in front of 200 people. You were rambling about the accident, bringing up painful memories that you should have processed years ago." "That's not fine, Isabella. That's concerning." "I wasn't having a panic attack. I was remembering something." "Remembering what exactly?" Isabella hesitated. The fragments of memory felt important somehow, significant, but they were still too unclear, too incomplete. And something in her father's voice, a sharp, dangerous edge beneath the concern, made her reluctant to share them. "I don't know," she said finally. "It was nothing. Just the stress of the evening, like you said." She heard her father move closer, felt the mattress dip as he sat beside her on the bed. His hand found her shoulder, the touch light but somehow still heavy with unspoken warning. "I worry about you, sweetheart," he said softly. "You've been through so much, lost so much. I just want to protect you from anything that might hurt you further. You understand that, don't you?" "Yes, Daddy." "Good girl." He patted her shoulder, then stood. "I have meetings all day, but Mrs. Chen will be here if you need anything. And remember, Dr. Brennan is coming at 3. Please be cooperative with her. She's only trying to help." After he left, Isabella sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the penthouse, the distant hum of traffic 40 stories below, the soft tick of the antique clock in the hallway, the whisper of the air conditioning. These were the sounds of her prison, familiar and suffocating in equal measure. She thought about the janitor, Caleb, that had been his name. She thought about his rough, calloused hand holding hers so gently, about his patient voice counting out the steps, about the way he'd looked at her like she was a person instead of a tragedy. And she thought about what he'd said to her father. "I think maybe she does know what she wants. I think maybe nobody's asked her in a long time." Had anyone ever asked her what she wanted? Really asked, without already knowing the answer they expected to hear? Isabella stood and made her way across her room with the practiced ease of someone who'd memorized every inch of her space. 12 steps to the window, turn right. 8 steps to the desk. Her fingers found the laptop her father had given her, adaptive technology, he'd said, so she wouldn't feel so isolated. In reality, it was just another way for him to monitor her, to know who she contacted and what she said. But Isabella had gotten better over the years at finding small spaces of privacy, tiny cracks in her father's surveillance. She'd learned how to clear her browsing history, how to use private windows, how to be careful. She opened the laptop and navigated to a search engine, her screen reader speaking the words as she typed them in. Victor Harrington Business Practices. The results came back in a flood. Her father's name was everywhere. Business magazines, financial news sites, society pages. Most of the coverage was glowing: visionary CEO, brilliant strategist, philanthropist extraordinaire. But buried deeper, in smaller publications and older articles, were other words: ruthless, vindictive, questionable dealings. Isabella dug deeper, following links, listening as her screen reader processed article after article. Most of it was the usual business world drama: hostile takeovers, corporate politics, bitter rivals. Nothing particularly damning. Then she found an article from 8 years ago, just 2 years after the accident. The headline made her breath catch: Harrington Foundation under investigation for misappropriation of funds. She listened intently as her screen reader processed the text. Apparently there had been allegations that the foundation, the one supposedly established in her mother's memory, had been funneling money to offshore accounts, using charitable donations for personal enrichment. The investigation had been dropped after 6 months, the article said, due to lack of evidence and cooperation from key witnesses, one of whom had died in a car accident shortly before the investigation was closed. Isabella's hands were shaking now. She navigated to another search, typing in the dead witness's name, Marcus Reeves' death. The results were sparse. A small obituary noting his passing at age 47. A brief news item about the single-car accident on a rain-slicked road. No follow-up. No questions asked. Just like her mother's death. Just like so many convenient accidents that seemed to happen to people who got in Victor Harrington's way. Miss Isabella? Isabella jumped, her hands flying away from the keyboard like she'd been burned. Mrs. Chen, her father's housekeeper and Isabella's designated caretaker, stood in the doorway. "I'm sorry to startle you," Mrs. Chen said in her soft, accented English. "I brought your lunch. Would you like me to set it on the desk?" "Yes, thank you," Isabella said, trying to keep her voice steady as she closed the laptop. "Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Miss Isabella. Do you remember my mother? You worked here before the accident, didn't you?" There was a pause. Isabella heard the soft clink of dishes being arranged, the careful placement of silverware. "Yes," Mrs. Chen said finally. "I remember Mrs. Catherine. She was very kind." "What was she like? Really like, I mean, not the version my father tells at galas." Another pause, longer this time. When Mrs. Chen spoke again, her voice was careful, measured. "She loved you very much, Miss Isabella. She always said you were the best thing she ever did, the only truly good thing in her life." The phrasing was odd, not one of the best things, the only truly good thing. "Mrs. Chen," Isabella said softly, "were my parents happy together?" "I should check on the laundry," Mrs. Chen said abruptly. "Please eat your lunch while it's warm." She left before Isabella could ask anything else, the door closing with a soft but definitive click. Isabella sat alone with her thoughts and her cooling lunch and the growing certainty that everything she'd been told about the night of the accident, about her mother's death, about her own guilt, was a carefully constructed lie. Meanwhile, across the city in a cramped apartment in Queens, Caleb Rowe was having a very different kind of morning. "Dad, you're not listening!" Maya's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. She was sitting across from him at their tiny kitchen table, her science textbook open between them, her expression exasperated in that particular way that 12-year-olds perfected. "The question is about mitochondria, not chloroplasts." "Right, sorry," Caleb said, dragging his attention back to the homework in front of them. "Mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell." "You've been weird since Saturday night," Maya observed, her sharp eyes studying him with an intensity that reminded him painfully of Sarah. "Did something happen at that fancy party?" Caleb hesitated. He'd been trying not to think about the gala, about Isabella, about the way Victor Harrington had looked at him like he was something to be scraped off a shoe. He'd been expecting to be fired for days now, but so far nothing had happened. No angry phone calls from his supervisor, no termination notice, just silence, which was somehow worse than being fired. The waiting, the wondering. "Dad?" Maya prompted. "Just tired," Caleb said, forcing a smile. "Long night. Now, about those mitochondria." They worked through the homework together, Maya's natural brilliance making most of it easy despite the complexity of the material. She was already working 2 grade levels ahead in science, her teachers talking about special programs and scholarships and futures that seemed both impossibly bright and terrifyingly expensive. "Mr. Chen says I should start thinking about summer programs," Maya said as she closed her textbook. "There's this thing at Columbia for advanced science students. It's competitive, but he thinks I could get in." Caleb felt his chest tighten. "That sounds great, honey. Is it expensive?" Maya's face fell slightly. "It's okay. We don't have to. It's not that important." "Hey," Caleb said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Don't do that. Don't make yourself smaller because of money. Your mom would kill me if I let you do that. If this program is something you want, we'll figure it out. Okay?" Maya nodded, but Caleb could see the worry in her eyes. She was 12, but she understood their situation better than he wished she did. She knew about the overtime hours he worked, about the bills that stacked up on the counter, about the careful budgeting that went into every purchase. She knew that her dreams cost money they didn't have. After Maya left for school, Caleb sat alone in the apartment, drinking coffee that had gone cold and staring at his phone. He should be sleeping. He'd worked until 3 in the morning and had to be back at the construction site at noon. But his mind wouldn't settle, kept circling back to Isabella Harrington and the fragments of memory she'd been grasping at on the dance floor. They were fighting about me, about sending me away. What had she meant by that? And why had Victor Harrington looked so panicked when she'd started remembering? Caleb told himself it wasn't his business. He'd done his good deed for the year, given a lonely girl one dance, and now he needed to move on with his life. He had his own problems, his own responsibilities. But he couldn't shake the image of Isabella's face, the desperate hope in her expression when he'd asked her to dance, the way she'd looked back at him as her father dragged her away. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to see, that he'd stumbled into something dark and dangerous without meaning to. His phone rang, jolting him out of his thoughts. Unknown number. Caleb considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Mr. Rowe? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Speaking. My name is Jennifer Torres. I'm an investigative journalist with the Manhattan Observer. I was at the Harrington Gala on Saturday night, and I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about what happened. Caleb's grip on the phone tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Come on, Mr. Rowe. You made quite an impression, dancing with Victor Harrington's daughter, challenging him in front of 200 witnesses? That's not exactly subtle. It was just a dance, that's all. Was it? Jennifer's voice sharpened with interest. Because from where I was standing, it looked like Isabella Harrington was having some kind of breakthrough, like she was remembering something, and her father looked absolutely terrified. I really can't help you, Caleb said. I need to go. Victor Harrington is not a good man, Mr. Rowe. I've been investigating him for 3 years now, and I know things about his business practices, about the people who've gotten in his way, about the convenient accidents that seem to happen to his enemies. Caleb's blood ran cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that Catherine Harrington's death might not have been the tragic accident everyone thinks it was. I'm saying that there were inconsistencies in the police report, witness statements that disappeared, evidence that was never properly examined. I'm saying that if Isabella is starting to remember what really happened that night, she might be in danger. You're crazy, Caleb said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then why did Marcus Reeves die 2 weeks before he was supposed to testify about the Harrington Foundation's financial irregularities? Why did Sarah Kim, Victor's former assistant, suddenly move to Singapore and refuse to answer questions about her time at Harrington Industries? Why did... Stop, Caleb said. Just stop. Even if what you're saying is true, what do you expect me to do about it? I'm a janitor. I clean floors. I have a daughter to take care of. I won't get involved in whatever this is. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was softer, almost sympathetic. I understand, Mr. Rowe. I do. But that girl is trapped in that penthouse with a man who might have killed her mother. And you might be the first person in 10 years to treat her like a human being instead of a prop. So if you hear anything, see anything, if she tries to contact you, please call me. She rattled off a phone number. Caleb didn't write it down, didn't acknowledge he'd heard it. He just hung up and sat there, his hands shaking, his mind racing. This was insane. This was none of his business. He needed to forget about Isabella Harrington and focus on his own life, his own daughter, his own problems. But Jennifer's words kept echoing in his head. She might be in danger. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Dr. Brennan arrived at the Harrington penthouse carrying her leather notebook and her expression of professional concern. Isabella heard her efficient footsteps in the hallway, the brief exchange with Mrs. Chen, the knock on her door. Come in, Isabella said, settling herself in the chair by the window where these sessions always took place. Dr. Brennan entered with her usual brisk efficiency, the smell of her expensive perfume arriving before she did. Good afternoon, Isabella. How are we feeling today? Fine, Isabella said automatically. Your father tells me you had an incident at the gala, some kind of panic attack? It wasn't a panic attack. I was just overwhelmed by the crowd. I see. The scratch of pen on paper. Dr. Brennan was always writing things down, documenting every word, every hesitation. And this business with the janitor, dancing with him in front of everyone, that was very unlike you. He asked me to dance. I said yes. I didn't think it was a crime. No one's saying it's a crime, Isabella. Dr. Brennan's voice was patient in that way that made Isabella want to scream. But it does suggest some concerning impulses. A desire to act out, perhaps. To seek attention in inappropriate ways. I wanted to dance, Isabella said flatly. That's all. Is wanting to dance inappropriate now? Of course not. But choosing to do so with a stranger, someone completely unsuitable, someone who could have been taking advantage of your vulnerability, that shows poor judgment. It shows that you're not thinking clearly. Isabella's hands clenched in her lap. Or maybe it shows that I'm tired of sitting in corners while everyone else lives their lives. Maybe it shows that I want something more than being my father's tragic prop. The silence that followed was heavy and dangerous. When Dr. Brennan spoke again, her voice had lost its patient tone. That's a very hostile way to speak about your father, Isabella. The man who's devoted his life to taking care of you after the accident that you caused. There it was. The weapon Dr. Brennan always reached for when Isabella got too close to speaking her truth. The guilt. The shame. The constant reminder that she'd killed her mother, that she owed her father everything, that she had no right to want or need or feel anything beyond gratitude for being allowed to exist. Usually, it worked. Usually, Isabella would shrink back into herself, apologize, swallow whatever rebellious thought had surfaced. But something was different now. Something had shifted on that dance floor, in those brief moments of freedom, and Isabella couldn't quite make herself fold as easily as she used to. What if I didn't cause it? She said quietly. Another silence, longer this time. Excuse me? The accident. What if I didn't cause it? What if there's more to that night than what everyone's told me? Isabella, we've been through this countless times. You were driving, the road was wet, you lost control of the vehicle. These are facts, not opinions. But I've been remembering things that don't match that story. My parents fighting, my father saying something about sending me away, my mother saying she wouldn't allow it, that she'd protect me. Why would they be fighting about that if everything was fine? The pen had stopped scratching. Dr. Brennan's silence felt different now, sharper, more alert. Traumatic memories are notoriously unreliable, she said finally. Your mind could be creating false narratives, mixing up different events, trying to absolve yourself of guilt by inventing alternative explanations. Or maybe my mind is finally remembering what actually happened. Isabella. Dr. Brennan's voice was sharp now, all pretense of therapeutic warmth gone. I'm going to recommend to your father that we adjust your medications. These delusional thoughts, this paranoid ideation, it's very concerning. It suggests that you're not as stable as we thought. I'm not delusional, Isabella said, but she could hear the fear creeping into her own voice. She knew what adjusting medications meant. More pills, more fog, more of her thoughts and feelings being chemically flattened into acceptable shapes. We'll see what your father thinks, Dr. Brennan said. In the meantime, I want you to stay away from stressful situations. No more charity events. No more interactions with inappropriate individuals. You need peace and quiet to recover your equilibrium. Translation: no more dances. No more glimpses of freedom. Back to her room, her audiobooks, her carefully controlled existence. After Dr. Brennan left, Isabella sat alone in her room, listening to the sound of her own breathing. She thought about the laptop on her desk, about the articles she'd found, about the questions that were multiplying in her mind like bacteria in a petri dish. She thought about Caleb Rowe, the janitor who'd treated her like a person, who'd given her one brief taste of what it felt like to be alive. And she thought about what Jennifer Torres, the journalist whose articles she'd stumbled across in her searches, had written, "Victor Harrington leaves no loose ends." If Isabella was a loose end, if she was starting to remember things that threatened her father's carefully constructed narrative, what would he do to tie her up? The answer came with a cold clarity that made her shiver. Exactly what he'd done to her mother. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust, someone outside her father's sphere of influence. But who? Dr. Brennan reported everything to Victor. Mrs. Chen, for all her kindness, was too afraid to cross him. Isabella had no friends. Her father had made sure of that over the years, slowly isolating her until there was no one left but him. No one except a janitor who'd been brave enough or foolish enough to ask her to dance. Isabella moved to her desk and opened the laptop, her fingers trembling as she navigated to a private browser window. She didn't know if this would work. She didn't even know if he'd respond. But she had to try. She typed carefully, using the voice-to-text function that her screen reader provided. Caleb Rowe, Queens, New York, janitor. The search brought up sparse results. A mention in a local community newsletter from 2 years ago, something about a fundraiser for childhood cancer research in memory of his late wife. An old social media profile that hadn't been updated in years. But it was enough. She found a phone number listed in a public directory, probably his home line. Isabella stared at the screen, her screen reader repeating the number in its mechanical voice. This was insane. This was dangerous. If her father found out she was trying to contact Caleb, there would be consequences. Dr. Brennan had already made it clear that any further inappropriate behavior would result in increased medication, increased surveillance. But what was the alternative? Sit in her room and wait for her fragments of memory to be chemically erased? Let whatever truth was buried in her mind stay buried forever? She thought about her mother, about the woman she barely remembered anymore except in dreams and scattered impressions. Catherine Harrington had been trying to protect her from something, had maybe died trying to protect her. Didn't Isabella owe it to her mother to find out the truth? With shaking hands, Isabella reached for her phone, the accessible smartphone her father had given her, the one she knew he monitored. She couldn't call from this. But she'd learned over the years about payphones, about burner phones, about ways to communicate that didn't leave digital trails. She just needed to get out of the penthouse first. That night, after her father had gone to bed, and Mrs. Chen had retired to her small apartment off the kitchen, Isabella lay awake in the dark, planning. She knew the layout of the penthouse by heart. Every room, every hallway, every potential obstacle. She knew where the security cameras were positioned, knew that the elevator required a key card after 10 p.m., knew that the stairwell door had an alarm that would sound if opened. But she also knew something her father didn't know she knew. Mrs. Chen sometimes propped the service entrance door open when she took out the trash late at night, a small violation of security protocols that she thought no one noticed. Isabella had noticed. She'd filed the information away in the part of her mind that was always cataloging potential escapes, potential freedoms, potential ways to be something other than a prisoner in a gilded cage. At 1:30 in the morning, Isabella heard it, the soft creak of Mrs. Chen's door, the shuffle of footsteps toward the service area, the quiet clink of the trash bag being lifted. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. Isabella slipped out of bed, already dressed in jeans and a sweater, her white cane folded in her hand. She moved through her room with practiced silence, counting steps, trailing her fingers along familiar surfaces. Into the hallway, past her father's room. She could hear his snoring, deep and regular. Down the corridor toward the service entrance. She heard Mrs. Chen humming softly as she dealt with the trash. Then footsteps moving away toward the compactor room. The door was open, just for a moment, just long enough. Isabella slipped through into the stairwell, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. She stood in the cold concrete space, listening for any sign that she'd been noticed. Nothing. Just the distant hum of building machinery and her own ragged breathing. She'd done it. She was out. Now she just had to figure out how to navigate 40 flights of stairs, get out of the building without being stopped by security, find a payphone in Manhattan at 2 in the morning, and call a man she'd met once for 30 minutes. Isabella started down the stairs, her cane tapping against concrete, and for the first time in 10 years she felt something that might have been hope. Or terror. Possibly both. The stairs seemed endless, each flight bleeding into the next until Isabella lost count somewhere around the 23rd floor. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, and her cane kept catching on the metal edges of the steps, sending jarring vibrations up her arm. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant thinking about what she was doing, about the insanity of a blind woman navigating 40 flights of emergency stairs in the middle of the night. And if she started thinking about it too hard, she'd lose her nerve completely. At the 15th floor, she heard a door open somewhere above her. Voices echoed in the stairwell, security guards maybe, or maintenance workers. Isabella froze, pressing herself against the wall, barely breathing. The voices faded, a door slammed, and she was alone again with just the sound of her own gasping breaths and the thud of her pulse in her ears. Keep moving. Don't think. Just move. By the time she reached the ground floor, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip her cane. The exit door loomed in front of her. She could feel the slight temperature change, the whisper of air circulation that told her she was close to the outside world. But between her and freedom was the lobby, with its night security desk and cameras and all the careful systems her father had put in place to keep his broken daughter safe and contained. Isabella stood with her hand on the door handle, terror and determination warring in her chest. She could still go back. Climb those 40 flights again, slip back into her room, pretend this moment of rebellion had never happened. Dr. Brennan would adjust her medications, the fog would roll back in, and she'd forget about dancing and memories and the growing certainty that her entire life was built on lies. She pushed the door open. The lobby was quiet at this hour, just the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic from the street outside. Isabella could hear someone moving at the security desk, papers rustling, the soft tap of fingers on a keyboard. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked forward like she had every right to be there. "Miss Harrington?" The security guard's voice was surprised, concerned. "Is everything all right? Does your father know you're—" "I couldn't sleep," Isabella said, keeping her voice steady, casual. "I wanted to get some fresh air, just to walk around the block." "At 2 in the morning?" The guard sounded dubious. "I should really call up to the penthouse. Make sure, Mr. Harrington, please don't." Isabella let a tremor into her voice now, let herself sound fragile, helpless. "He worries so much already. I just need a few minutes. I have my phone. I'll stay right outside, please. I feel so trapped up there sometimes." The last sentence was true enough that it came out with real emotion. The guard was silent for a long moment, and Isabella could almost hear him weighing his options, trying to decide if letting the boss's disabled daughter wander outside at 2 a.m. would get him fired or if stopping her would cause more problems. 10 minutes, he said finally. "Stay where I can see you through the glass, and keep your phone on. If anything happens, I'm calling your father." "Thank you," Isabella breathed, and she meant it. "Thank you so much." The night air hit her like a slap when she stepped outside, cold and sharp and alive with sounds her penthouse never captured. Traffic humming in the distance, someone shouting something in Spanish from a window across the street, the rattle of a subway grate. The city, breathing and moving and existing beyond the carefully controlled silence of her father's world. Isabella turned right, her cane sweeping in front of her, counting steps. She knew the security guard was watching through the glass, knew she couldn't go far, or he'd follow her. But there was a corner just ahead she remembered from the few times she'd been outside in recent years. If she could just make it to that corner, out of direct line of sight for just a moment. "Need some help, miss?" The voice came from her left, male and raspy with age. Isabella's heart jumped, but she kept walking. "I'm fine, thank you." "You don't look fine. You look lost and scared." Isabella stopped, turned toward the voice. "I'm looking for a payphone. Do you know where I can find one?" The man laughed, a sound like crackling paper. "Payphone? What is this, 1995? Nobody uses payphones anymore, miss. You got a cell phone, don't you?" "I can't use my cell phone. Please. There has to be a payphone somewhere nearby." A pause. Then, "There's one at the bodega on 57th, 2 blocks that way." "But miss, if you're in trouble, if someone's hurting you—" "I'm fine," Isabella said quickly, too quickly. "I just need to make a phone call, that's all." "Okay," the man said, and Isabella heard something like understanding in his voice. 2 blocks straight, then left. The bodega's on the corner. Owner's name is Rashid. Tell him Danny sent you, he'll let you use the phone." "Thank you," Isabella whispered. "Thank you, Danny." She was already moving, her cane tapping urgently against the sidewalk. Behind her, she heard Danny call out, "Be careful out there, miss. World's not kind to people alone in the dark." 2 blocks felt like 2 miles. Every sound made Isabella jump, car horns, voices, the crash of a trash can being knocked over. She'd lived in Manhattan her entire life, but she'd experienced so little of it beyond the carefully curated spaces her father allowed. Now, navigating it blind and alone in the middle of the night, she felt like an astronaut who'd suddenly been cut loose from their ship, spinning into the void. But she kept moving, kept counting, kept following the mental map she was constructing from sound and memory and desperate hope. She'd lived in Manhattan her entire life, but she'd experienced so little of it beyond the carefully curated spaces her father allowed. Now, navigating it blind and alone in the middle of the night, she felt like an astronaut who'd suddenly been cut loose from their ship, spinning into the void. But she kept moving, kept counting, kept following the mental map she was constructing from sound and memory and desperate hope. When she finally felt the change in air current that signaled a corner, heard the electronic chime of a door, smelled the distinct combination of coffee and cleaning products that meant she'd found the bodega, Isabella nearly sobbed with relief. "We're closed," a tired voice said as she pushed through the door. "Come back at 6. "Rashid?" Isabella said. "Danny sent me. He said you might let me use your phone, please. It's an emergency." Silence. Then footsteps, and Isabella felt someone studying her, taking in her designer clothes and her white cane and her obvious terror. "What kind of emergency brings a blind girl to my store at 2 in the morning? Rashid's voice was cautious but not unkind. "The kind where I can't use my own phone because someone's monitoring it. The kind where I need help and I don't know who else to ask. Please, I'll pay you. I have money." "Put your money away," Rashid interrupted. "Phone's in the back by the office. You know how to use a payphone?" "I'll figure it out." Isabella heard him move behind the counter, heard the jingle of keys, the creak of a door opening. Then his hand was gently guiding her elbow, leading her through the narrow aisles of the bodega to a small back office that smelled like cigarettes and curry. "Phone's on the wall to your left," Rashid said. "Take your time. I'll be up front if you need anything." Alone in the tiny office, Isabella fumbled for the phone, her hand shaking so badly she could barely lift the receiver. She'd memorized the number, had repeated it to herself during every step of the journey down from the penthouse, terrified that if she lost it, she'd lose her only chance at help. She dialed, the rotary mechanism clicking under her fingers, each number feeling like a small prayer. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" The voice was groggy, confused. Caleb Rowe, pulled from sleep by a call from a number he wouldn't recognize. "Mr. Rowe?" Isabella's voice came out barely above a whisper. "It's Isabella Harrington, from the gala. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else." "Isabella?" Caleb was awake now, his voice sharp with concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at a bodega on 57th Street. I left my father's apartment. I snuck out. I know this sounds crazy, but I think he's been lying to me about the accident, about my mother, about everything. And I'm starting to remember things. And I'm scared of what will happen when he finds out I'm remembering." "Slow down," Caleb said, and Isabella could hear rustling on his end, the sound of him getting out of bed. "Take a breath. Are you safe right now? Is anyone following you?" "I don't think so, but the security guard saw me leave. He'll call my father soon. Maybe he already has. I don't have much time." Okay, listen to me. Do you know the exact address of where you are?" Isabella turned toward where she thought Rashid might be. "Excuse me? What's the address here?" Rashid's voice came from the doorway. 342 West 57th, between 8th and 9th. Isabella repeated it into the phone. Caleb was silent for a moment, and she could hear him typing something, probably looking up the address. "I'm in Queens," he said. "It's going to take me at least 45 minutes to get to you, maybe longer at this hour. Can you stay where you are? Stay safe?" "I don't know, maybe, but Mr. Rowe. Caleb. Even if you come get me, then what? I can't just disappear. My father will call the police. They'll find me. They'll bring me back, and then..." Her voice broke. "I don't know what he'll do then." "We'll figure it out," Caleb said firmly. "But right now, I need you to stay calm and stay put. I'm getting dressed. I'm going to wake up my daughter, and we're coming to get you, okay? Just hold on." "You don't have to do this," Isabella whispered. You don't owe me anything. We barely know each other. I shouldn't have called. I should hang up and... Isabella. Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. You asked me to dance. I said yes. Now you're asking me to help. I'm saying yes again. That's all there is to it. Stay where you are. I'm coming. The line went dead. Isabella stood there with the receiver in her hand, tears streaming down her face, equal parts terrified and relieved. She'd done it. She'd asked for help. Now she just had to hope she'd live long enough to receive it. Back in Queens, Caleb was moving through his apartment like a man possessed, throwing on clothes, grabbing his keys, his wallet, his phone. In the doorway of Maya's room, he paused, looking at his daughter's sleeping face, peaceful and innocent in the glow of her nightlight. This was insane. He was about to wake his 12-year-old daughter in the middle of the night to drive into Manhattan and pick up a woman they barely knew, a woman whose father could destroy them with a single phone call. He was about to involve Maya in something dangerous, something that could blow up their entire lives. But he thought about Isabella's voice on the phone, the fear in it, the desperate courage it must have taken to make that call. He thought about the way she'd looked on that dance floor, coming alive for the first time in who knew how many years. He thought about what Sarah would tell him to do. Maya, he said softly, touching his daughter's shoulder. Wake up, honey. We need to go help someone. Maya's eyes blinked open, confused. Dad? What time is it? Late or early, depending on how you look at it. I need you to get dressed, okay? We're going for a drive. Is something wrong? Is Grandma... Everyone's fine, but there's someone who needs our help and I can't leave you here alone. Can you trust me on this? Maya studied his face for a long moment, her expression far too serious for a 12-year-old. Then she nodded and climbed out of bed, reaching for her jeans. Is this about the lady from the party? She asked. The blind one you danced with? Caleb paused in the doorway. How did you know about that? I Googled you. You're kind of famous now, Dad. There are like 10 articles about the janitor who danced with Victor Harrington's daughter. Some of them have pictures. Of course you Googled me, Caleb muttered. Get dressed. 5 minutes. They were in the car 7 minutes later, heading toward Manhattan through streets that were eerily empty at this hour. Maya sat in the passenger seat, her science textbook on her lap. She'd grabbed it automatically, unable to leave the house without something to read. Dad, she said as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge, is this lady in trouble? Like, real trouble? Caleb's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I think so, yeah. Are we in trouble for helping her? Maybe. Probably. I don't know yet. Maya was quiet for a moment, then, Mom would say we should help anyway. Caleb felt his throat tighten. Yeah, she would. Okay then. Maya opened her textbook, squinting at the pages in the dim light from the dashboard. Let me know when we get there. Caleb wanted to hug her, wanted to tell her how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she existed. Instead, he drove faster, winding through the empty streets of Manhattan toward a bodega on 57th where a frightened woman was waiting for rescue. At the bodega, Isabella had moved from the back office to a chair near the door, where she could hear the street outside, could monitor for the sound of approaching footsteps or cars. Rashid had brought her a cup of tea, too sweet but warm, and was puttering around the store, restocking shelves and occasionally murmuring to himself in a language Isabella didn't recognize. Your friend, he said after a while. He's coming for you? I hope so, Isabella said. If he doesn't, I don't know what I'll do. Go to the police, maybe? Isabella laughed, a bitter sound. My father has the police commissioner on speed dial. They'd just bring me back to him. Ah. Rashid was quiet for a moment. This father of yours, he's a bad man? I don't know, Isabella said honestly. I'm starting to think he might be. I'm starting to think he might have killed my mother. The words hung in the air, stark and terrible. It was the first time she'd said it out loud, let the thought become real by speaking it into existence. Rashid made a sound that might have been sympathy or might have been recognition. I had a father like that, he said quietly, back in Pakistan. Powerful man. Important man. Everyone feared him. Everyone respected him. And behind closed doors, he was a monster. What did you do? I left, came here. Started over. It wasn't easy, but He paused. Sometimes the only way to survive is to run very far and never look back. Isabella thought about running, about disappearing into the vast anonymity of America, about becoming someone other than Isabella Harrington, tragic heiress. It sounded impossible and terrifying and maybe, just maybe, like the only chance she had. A car pulled up outside. Isabella heard the engine cut, heard doors opening, heard footsteps approaching quickly. Her entire body tensed, ready to run, to hide, to fight. "Isabella?" Caleb's voice. "It's me. It's okay." She stood so fast the chair nearly tipped over behind her. Rashid steadied it, then gently guided her toward the door where Caleb was waiting. "Thank you," Isabella said to Rashid. "Thank you for everything." "Go," Rashid said simply, "and don't come back. Whatever you're running from, keep running." Outside, Caleb's hand found Isabella's elbow, steadying her as she navigated the step down to the sidewalk. "My car's right here," he said. "My daughter Maya's in the passenger seat. She's going to climb in back with you, help you get settled." "Hi," a young voice said shyly. "I'm Maya. Don't worry, my dad's actually a pretty good driver when he's not running red lights to rescue people." "I didn't run any red lights," Caleb protested as he helped Isabella into the back seat. "You totally ran one at 46th Street, Maya said, climbing in beside Isabella. "I saw it." Despite everything, Isabella felt herself smile. There was something surreal and wonderful about sitting in a stranger's car, listening to a father and daughter bicker, being treated like a person instead of a tragedy. "Where are we going?" she asked as Caleb started the engine. That was the question, wasn't it? Caleb had been thinking about it during the entire drive, running through options and discarding them one by one. They couldn't take her to his apartment. That would be the first place anyone looked. They couldn't take her to a hotel. She'd need ID, a credit card, things that could be traced. They couldn't take her to the police for reasons Isabella had already explained. "I have an idea," he said slowly. "It's not great, but it might buy us some time. There's a journalist who called me yesterday. She's been investigating your father. She might be able to help." "Jennifer Torres," Isabella said. "I found one of her articles about the Foundation investigation." "That's her. She gave me her number, told me to call if anything happened, if you needed help. I think maybe we should take her up on that offer." Isabella was quiet for a moment, her hands twisted in her lap. Then she nodded. "Okay, yes, call her." Caleb pulled the car over to the side of the road and dug his phone out of his pocket. It was almost 3 a.m. now, but Jennifer Torres had said to call if anything happened. Well, something had definitely happened. The phone rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "This better be important." "Ms. Torres, it's Caleb Rowe. We spoke yesterday about Isabella Harrington." Silence. Then Jennifer's voice came back, sharp and awake now. "What's happened?" "I have Isabella with me. She left her father's apartment. She's scared and she's asking for help and I don't know what to do. You said you were investigating Victor Harrington. You said she might be in danger. Well, I think you were right. And we need help." Another pause. Caleb could hear rustling, the sound of movement. "Where are you right now?" Caleb gave her the intersection. Jennifer swore softly. "Okay. Listen carefully. You're about 10 blocks from my apartment. I'm going to give you the address. Get here as fast as you can, but don't speed. Don't do anything that might get you pulled over. And for God's sake, turn off your phones. All of them. If Victor Harrington wants to find his daughter, he'll track those phones in about 30 seconds. "Turn off our phones?" Caleb looked at his phone in his hand like it had suddenly become a snake. "Now," Jennifer said sharply. "Do it now. I'll see you in 10 minutes. The line went dead. Caleb stared at the phone, then at Maya, who was already pulling hers out of her pocket. "You heard the lady," Maya said, powering down her device. "Spy movie rules now." Caleb turned off his phone, feeling strangely naked without it, disconnected from the world in a way that felt both terrifying and liberating. In the back seat, Isabella had pulled out her own phone, a sleek, expensive device with accessibility features, and was holding it like it might explode. "There's probably tracking software on this," she said quietly. "My father can see everywhere I go, everyone I call. I should have realized that before. I should have left it at the penthouse." "Too late now," Caleb said, pulling back into traffic. Just turn it off. We'll figure out the rest later. Jennifer Torres lived in a modest building in Hell's Kitchen, the kind of place where artists and journalists and other people who'd chosen passion over profit scraped by. Her apartment was on the 4th floor, and she was waiting in the hallway when they arrived, a small woman in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Inside, she said without preamble, ushering them into a tiny apartment that was mostly books and papers and the detritus of obsessive investigation. Quickly, we don't have much time. Isabella stumbled slightly on the threshold, overwhelmed by the sudden change in environment, the unfamiliar space. Maya caught her arm, steadying her. It's okay, Maya whispered. There's a couch about 6 steps forward. Want me to guide you? Please, Isabella breathed, and let this child she'd just met lead her to safety. Jennifer closed the door and locked it, then turned to face them, her expression grim. Okay, start from the beginning. Tell me everything. So they did. Isabella talked about the memories that had been surfacing, about the fight between her parents the night of the accident, about Dr. Brennan and the medications, and the growing certainty that she'd been lied to her entire life. Caleb filled in the parts about the gala, about Victor's reaction, about the phone call from Jennifer that had started him down this path. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with each detail. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. This is bigger than I thought, she said finally. I've been investigating Victor for 3 years. Financial crimes mostly, money laundering, embezzlement, suspicious charitable foundations. But if what you're suggesting is true, if he actually killed your mother, Isabella, that's murder. That's not something we can handle on our own. You said we couldn't go to the police, Caleb pointed out. I said she couldn't go to the police, not without proof. But if we can find that proof, if we can build a case that's solid enough that even Victor Harrington's connections can't make it go away, that's different. That changes everything. Well, what kind of proof? Isabella asked, her voice small. Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes intense. You said you were in the car when it happened. You said you've been remembering things. What exactly do you remember about that night? Isabella's hands twisted in her lap. Pieces, fragments, they were fighting. My father said something about me becoming a problem, about needing to send me away. My mother refused. She said she'd protect me. And then she paused, her brow furrowing with concentration. There was music playing, on the radio, a waltz, the same song they played at the gala. And then my father, he grabbed the wheel. I remember his hand reaching across, yanking it to the side. The car swerved. My mother screamed, and then impact and pain and darkness. The room was silent. Even Maya had stopped fidgeting, her young face pale and serious. You're saying your father deliberately crashed the car, Jennifer said carefully. That he murdered your mother and made it look like an accident caused by a teenager losing control on a wet road. I don't know, Isabella whispered. I don't know what I'm saying. Maybe I'm making it all up. Maybe Dr. Brennan is right, and I'm just trying to absolve myself of guilt by creating false memories. But it feels true. It feels real. And when I started remembering it, when I was dancing with Caleb and the music triggered something, my father looked terrified. Not concerned, terrified. Jennifer stood and began pacing, her mind clearly racing. Okay, let's assume for a moment that you're right, that Victor killed Catherine and framed you for it. Why? What was his motive? I don't know, but Isabella paused, reaching for memories that felt just out of reach. In the weeks before the accident, my mother was different, scared, angry. She kept having these intense phone conversations that she didn't want me to hear. And she'd taken me to see a lawyer, though I didn't understand why at the time. She said we might be going away for a while, just the two of us. A long trip. Maybe even moving to another country. She was planning to leave him, Caleb said quietly. More than that, Jennifer said, her eyes lighting up with the excitement of a puzzle piece clicking into place. She was planning to expose him. I'd bet anything that Catherine Harrington discovered something about her husband's business dealings, something criminal, and she was going to blow the whistle, only she didn't get the chance. Because he killed her first, Maya breathed. and blamed it on Isabella so no one would ask questions. Everyone turned to look at the 12-year-old sitting on the edge of the couch, her science textbook forgotten on her lap. "What?" Maya said defensively. "It makes sense. If the mom dies in an accident caused by their traumatized teenage daughter, everyone feels bad for the dad. Nobody investigates. Case closed." "Out of the mouths of babes," Jennifer murmured. "The kid's right. It's the perfect crime. No one suspects murder when there's an obvious culprit who everyone wants to forgive because she's young and traumatized." "But if that's true," Isabella said, her voice shaking, "then I've spent 10 years blaming myself for something I didn't do. 10 years living as my father's prisoner, taking pills to fog my brain, letting him control every aspect of my life, all to cover up his crime." The enormity of it seemed to hit her all at once. She doubled over, a sob tearing from her throat, all the grief and rage and betrayal of the past decade pouring out in a sound that was almost inhuman in its pain. Maya was there immediately, wrapping her arms around Isabella in a fierce hug. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're going to help you. We're going to make this right." Over Maya's head, Caleb and Jennifer exchanged looks. The unspoken question hung between them. How? "We need proof," Jennifer said finally. "Real, concrete, undeniable proof. Isabella's recovered memories won't be enough, not against Victor Harrington's lawyers and influence. We need physical evidence. We need—" She stopped, her eyes widening. "The car. Isabella, what happened to the car from the accident?" Isabella lifted her head from Maya's shoulder, wiping at her tears. "I don't know. I never asked. I couldn't bear to think about it." Cars from fatal accidents are typically impounded and kept for a certain period during the investigation, Jennifer said, already moving toward her laptop. "If we can find out what happened to that vehicle, if we can examine it, there might be evidence, forensic evidence that could prove your father caused the crash." "That was 10 years ago," Caleb pointed out. "Would they still have it?" "Probably not an impound, but Victor Harrington is a sentimental man when it suits his narrative. I bet anything he kept that car. Had it stored somewhere, another prop in his tragic story." Jennifer was typing furiously now, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I have contacts in the NYPD who owe me favors. Let me make some calls, see if I can track down the vehicle records. In the meantime," she looked up at Caleb and Isabella. "You two need to stay here. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone. Victor will be looking for his daughter by now, and when he finds out she's gone, all hell is going to break loose." As if on cue, Caleb's powered-down phone, sitting on Jennifer's coffee table next to Maya's and Isabella's, began to buzz, the screen lighting up despite being turned off. An emergency override, the kind that only worked for specific priority contacts. They all stared at the phone as it continued to buzz insistently, Victor Harrington's name glowing on the screen like a threat. "Too late," Maya whispered. "He already knows." The phone continued its insistent buzzing, Victor Harrington's name pulsing on the screen like a heartbeat, like a countdown to something terrible. No one moved. They all stood frozen in Jennifer's cramped living room, staring at the device as if it might explode at any moment. "Don't answer it," Jennifer said sharply when Caleb reached toward the phone. "The second you do, he'll know you're involved. Right now, there's plausible deniability. You could say you lost your phone, it was stolen, whatever. But if you answer, he already knows," Isabella said quietly. She was still sitting on the couch, Maya's arm around her shoulders, but her voice had gone flat, emotionless. "He has resources you can't imagine, private investigators, security firms, people in the police department who owe him favors. If he wants to find me, he'll find me. It's only a matter of time." The phone stopped buzzing. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. They all stared at it, waiting. 5 seconds later, it started again. A different number this time. Then another. Then all three phones, Caleb's, Maya's, Isabella's, began lighting up simultaneously, an orchestrated assault of incoming calls. "He's calling everyone," Maya whispered. "How's he calling my phone? He doesn't even know who I am." "He knows," Jennifer said grimly. "Trust me, by now he knows everything. Your name, your age, where you go to school, your dad's work history, probably your grades and your favorite color. That's how men like Victor Harrington operate. They gather information like weapons." Caleb felt ice slide through his veins. He thought about Maya's school. about the apartment they lived in with its flimsy locks and ground floor windows. He thought about how exposed they were, how vulnerable, and what he'd done by bringing his daughter into this mess. "Maya," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "I need you to go into the bathroom. Lock the door. Stay there until I tell you it's safe." "Dad, I'm not leaving." "Now, Maya." His tone left no room for argument. "Please." Maya looked at him for a long moment, her expression torn between defiance and fear. Then she squeezed Isabella's hand once and stood, walking toward the bathroom with her chin held high, trying to be brave. The second the bathroom door clicked shut, Caleb turned to Jennifer. "What do we do? If he can find us, if he has that kind of reach, we can't just sit here waiting for him to show up." "We need leverage," Jennifer said, already moving back to her laptop. "Something that makes us more valuable alive and talking than disappeared. Isabella, you said your mother took you to see a lawyer before the accident. Do you remember the lawyer's name?" Isabella shook her head. "I was 14. I wasn't paying attention. It was somewhere in Midtown, I think. A big office building. But I can't remember." She stopped, her face suddenly going pale. "Wait, there was a picture on his desk of a golden retriever, and he kept calling it she, talking about how his girl had just had puppies. I remember thinking it was strange that a grown man was so excited about puppies." "That's something," Jennifer said, her fingers flying over the keys. "Lawyer, Midtown, golden retriever, female, had puppies around 10 years ago. It's not much, but..." She paused, squinting at her screen. "Actually, that might be enough. There's a family law attorney, Maxwell Brenner, office on 48th Street. His biography mentions his therapy dog, a golden retriever named Daisy, who, yes, here it is, helped raise 3 litters of service dog puppies. Does that sound right?" "I don't know," Isabella said helplessly. "Maybe. I was 14 and terrified, and I don't..." "It's okay," Jennifer said. "I'll call him. Right now. If your mother was planning to leave your father, if she was preparing a custody case or divorce proceedings, Brenner would have records, documents, evidence." "It's 4 in the morning, Caleb pointed out. "I don't care if it's 4 in the morning on Christmas. We need those files." Jennifer was already dialing, the phone pressed to her ear. "Come on, pick up, pick up." While Jennifer waited for the lawyer to answer, Caleb moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain, just enough to see the street below. It was still dark outside, the city caught in that strange, liminal space between night and morning. A few cars passed. A homeless man pushed a shopping cart down the sidewalk. Everything looked normal, peaceful, utterly ordinary. But Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere out there, Victor Harrington's eyes were already finding them. "Mr. Brenner?" Jennifer's voice snapped his attention back. "Yes, I know what time it is. My name is Jennifer Torres. I'm an investigative journalist with the Manhattan Observer. I need to speak with you about a case you handled 10 years ago. Catherine Harrington." A pause. Caleb could hear a male voice on the other end, agitated, confused. "I understand attorney-client privilege," Jennifer said. "But your client is dead, Mr. Brenner. She's been dead for 10 years. And I'm sitting here with her daughter, who's just escaped from what amounts to a decade of imprisonment by the man who probably killed her mother. So I'm going to need you to decide right now whether you're the kind of lawyer who hides behind privilege while a young woman's life is in danger, or the kind who does the right thing." More protests from the other end. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "Then let me put it another way," she said, her voice going cold. "Victor Harrington killed his wife. He's been covering it up for 10 years, using his daughter as a shield and a scapegoat. I'm going to prove it, with or without your help. But if you have documents that could help put a murderer behind bars, and you choose to sit on them because of some legal technicality, then you're complicit. And when this story breaks, and it will break, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that you could have helped and chose not to. Is that really how you want to be remembered?" Silence on the other end. Then Jennifer's face shifted, surprise and relief warring across her features. "You will? When?" Yes, I understand. We'll be there. Thank you, Mr. Brenner. Thank you so much." She hung up and turned to them, her eyes bright with something that might have been hope or might have been vindication. "He's meeting us at his office in an hour," she said. "He says he has files, documents that Catherine Harrington asked him to keep sealed until certain conditions were met. One of those conditions was if anything happened to her. Isabella made a small sound, something between a laugh and a sob. She knew. She knew he might kill her, and she prepared for it. She was trying to protect you, Jennifer said gently. She just ran out of time. Caleb looked at his watch. An hour. That's not much time to figure out how to get there without being followed or spotted. We'll take my car, Jennifer said. It's registered to my ex-husband, so it won't ping on any searches for my name. We'll go through back streets, avoid traffic cameras where we can. And she moved to a closet and pulled out a large cardboard box. We'll need disguises, nothing fancy, just enough to confuse facial recognition software if Victor has people watching traffic feeds. She dumped the contents of the box on the floor. Wigs, sunglasses, hats, scarves. The tools of a journalist who'd learned how to investigate powerful people without being noticed. Seriously? Caleb said, staring at a bright red wig. Seriously, Jennifer said. Put it on. And you? She turned to Isabella. You're already wearing sunglasses, which helps, but we need to change your clothes, make you look different from the description your father's probably already sent out to every security company in Manhattan. From the bathroom, they heard Maya's voice, muffled but insistent. Can I come out now? I need to pee, and I'm not doing it with you guys having a crisis out there. Despite everything, Caleb found himself almost smiling. Yeah, honey, come on out. Maya emerged, took one look at the pile of disguises, and immediately zeroed in on a purple wig with streaks of silver. I call this one. You're not coming, Caleb said. Yes, I am, Maya said calmly. Because if you leave me here alone, I'll just follow you anyway. And it's safer if I'm where you can see me than out there on my own trying to tail you. Plus, I'm small and unnoticeable. Good for surveillance. She's not wrong, Jennifer said. And honestly, a family group looks less suspicious than 3 adults sneaking around at 4 in the morning. We can say we're going to the airport, early flight, tourist family, whatever. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to lock his daughter in Jennifer's bathroom and keep her safe from all of this. But he knew Maya well enough to know that when she made up her mind about something, particularly something she believed was right, there was no stopping her. She was Sarah's daughter in that way, stubborn, principled, unwilling to back down when someone needed help. Fine, he said, but you stay close to me every second, understood? Understood, Maya said, already pulling on the purple wig. 20 minutes later, they looked like completely different people. Caleb wore the red wig, a baseball cap, and glasses with clear lenses. Jennifer had transformed into a blonde with heavy makeup. Maya looked like a punk rock kid with her purple hair and borrowed leather jacket. And Isabella, in borrowed jeans and a Columbia University sweatshirt Jennifer had produced from somewhere. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looked younger, more vulnerable, nothing like the elegant heiress from the gala. They moved through the building's back stairwell, emerging into a loading dock area where Jennifer's ancient Toyota waited. The car had seen better days, the paint was faded, the interior smelled like old coffee and cigarettes, and something rattled ominously when Jennifer started the engine. It's not pretty, Jennifer said, but it runs. And more importantly, it's invisible. This is New York. Nobody notices old, beat-up cars. She pulled out of the loading dock and into the empty streets, taking a deliberately circuitous route through the city. Dawn was just starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Delivery trucks were starting to appear, bakeries opening their doors, the city slowly waking up. They drove in silence for a while, tension thick in the car. Then Maya, who'd been staring out the window, spoke up. Isabella, can I ask you something? Of course, Isabella said softly from the back seat where she sat next to Maya. What was it like, being blind for 10 years? I mean, I know that's probably a rude question, but I'm curious. Do you miss seeing things? Caleb opened his mouth to tell his daughter that was absolutely a rude question, but Isabella was already answering. I do, she said, but not always the things you'd expect. I miss colors most of all, the way the sky looked at sunset, the specific shade of my mother's lipstick, my father's eyes. She paused. I used to think they were kind, warm. Now I wonder if I would see something different in them, if I could look at him now. When you went blind, Maya asked, was it instant, like someone turning off a light switch? Yes and no. There was light, and then impact, and then pain. And when I woke up in the hospital, everything was dark. The doctors said there was damage to my optic nerves, trauma to the visual cortex. They used a lot of technical terms that basically meant the same thing. I would never see again. Isabella's voice was remarkably calm, like she was discussing someone else's tragedy. For the first year, I kept having these moments where I'd forget. I'd wake up and think I just needed to open my eyes. Then I'd remember, and it was like losing my sight all over again every single morning. "That's awful," Maya said quietly. It was. But you adapt. The human brain is remarkable that way. My other senses got stronger. I learned to navigate the world differently, and in some ways, Isabella hesitated. In some ways, being blind made it easier for my father to control me, to keep me isolated, to convince me that I needed him, that I couldn't survive without him. If I could see, maybe I would have noticed things sooner. Maybe I would have questioned his story. But in the dark, it was easier to believe whatever I was told. Jennifer glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're questioning it now." "I'm terrified now," Isabella corrected. "Questioning and terrified aren't mutually exclusive." They pulled up outside Maxwell Brenner's office building just as the sun was fully cresting the horizon. The building was one of those generic midtown structures, all glass and steel and corporate anonymity. A security guard sat in the lobby, looking half asleep with a cup of coffee in his hand. "Okay," Jennifer said, parking the car. "We go in together. We're professional, calm. If anyone asks, we have an early meeting with Mr. Brenner. He's expecting us. We belong here. Confidence is key." They climbed out of the car, and Caleb was struck by how surreal this all was. 12 hours ago, he'd been mopping floors at a charity gala, worrying about normal things like rent and Maya's school supplies. Now he was wearing a red wig and helping a blind heiress escape from her potentially murderous father while a journalist tried to bring down one of Manhattan's most powerful men. Sarah would have loved this, he thought. She'd always said life was too short to play it safe. The security guard barely glanced at them as they signed in, too busy with his coffee to ask questions. They took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Maxwell Brenner's office waited at the end of a long carpeted hallway. The door was already open. Light spilled out into the dim corridor. Maxwell Brenner was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and thinning gray hair. He looked exactly like what he was, a family law attorney who'd seen too many ugly divorces and broken families. But his eyes, when they landed on Isabella, were kind. "Miss Harrington," he said softly. "You look just like your mother. Come in. Please. All of you." His office was neat, professional, with rows of law books and files organized with military precision. And there, on his desk, was a framed photo of a golden retriever. "Daisy," Isabella whispered, her hand reaching out toward the desk. "You're the lawyer with the dog." "I am," Brenner said, "and your mother was my client, one of the bravest women I ever knew." He moved to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with tape and covered in dust. "She gave me these documents 10 years ago, made me promise to keep them sealed unless something happened to her. When she died in that accident," his voice roughened, "I wanted to open them. I wanted to go to the police. But I was a coward. I was afraid of Victor Harrington, afraid of what he might do to me, to my family. So I told myself that it was probably nothing, that Catherine was just being paranoid, that her death really was just a tragic accident." He placed the envelope on the desk, his hand trembling slightly. "But I've regretted that decision every day for 10 years. And when you called, Ms. Torres, when you said Isabella was in danger, I knew I couldn't be a coward anymore." Jennifer picked up the envelope with reverent care. "What's in here?" "Everything," Brenner said. "Financial records showing Victor Harrington's embezzlement from his own foundation, documents proving he was funneling money to offshore accounts, evidence of bribery, fraud, witness intimidation, and—" He looked at Isabella, his expression pained. "A signed affidavit from your mother, detailing her fears that your father might try to kill her if she moved forward with divorce proceedings and criminal complaints. She even specified the circumstances that worried her most, a car accident that could be blamed on her teenage daughter." The room went utterly silent. Even Maya, who'd been fidgeting with her purple wig, went still. "She knew," Isabella whispered. She knew exactly what he was planning. She suspected, Brenner corrected gently. She couldn't prove it, but she wanted to protect you, Isabella. She wanted to make sure that if something happened to her, the truth wouldn't die with her. This envelope was her insurance policy, her last act of love. Jennifer was already opening the envelope, carefully pulling out documents and spreading them across Brenner's desk. Caleb watched her face shift through a dozen expressions: shock, anger, vindication, horror, as she scanned page after page of evidence. "This is it," she breathed. "This is everything we need. Financial crimes, conspiracy, fraud." And with Isabella's testimony about the night of the crash, about Victor grabbing the wheel, she looked up, her eyes blazing. "We can bury him. We can finally bury him." "But will it hold up in court?" Caleb asked. "These documents are 10 years old." His lawyers will argue that Catherine was unstable, that she was making false accusations out of spite, that the financial crimes are documented, Brenner interrupted. Bank records, transfer receipts, everything meticulously dated and verified. Catherine was brilliant about that. She knew that emotional testimony could be dismissed, but numbers don't lie. And if you can prove the financial crimes, it establishes motive for murder. It shows Victor had every reason to want his wife dead before she could expose him. "We need to make copies," Jennifer said, already gathering documents. "Multiple copies. We distribute them to different locations, different people. That way, even if Victor tries to make this evidence disappear, it's too late. It's already out there." "I have a scanner," Brenner said, moving toward a machine in the corner. "We can digitize everything right now. Send copies to... Who do we trust? Who has the power to actually do something with this?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "I have a contact at the FBI. She's been investigating financial crimes in the charity sector. If we can get these documents to her..." "Then do it," Caleb said. "Now, before Victor figures out where we are." They worked quickly, feeding pages through the scanner, watching the evidence that Catherine Harrington had died to preserve transform into digital files that could be sent anywhere, everywhere, impossible to suppress or destroy. Jennifer typed furiously on her laptop, crafting an email that would explain everything, that would lay out the case in clear, undeniable terms. Maya had moved to the window, keeping watch on the street below. Isabella sat in one of Brenner's client chairs, her hands folded in her lap, her face very pale. "Miss Harrington," Brenner said gently as he fed another page through the scanner. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," Isabella said honestly. "My mother left me this gift. The truth, evidence, justice. But it means accepting that my father is a monster. It means accepting that he killed her. That he let me think I killed her for 10 years. That every moment of kindness he's shown me, every concerned word, every gesture of protection, it was all a lie. How am I supposed to be all right with that?" No one had an answer for her. They just kept working, scanning and copying and preparing to bring down an empire. Then Maya's voice cut through the industrious silence, sharp with fear. "Dad, we have a problem." Caleb moved to the window. Down on the street, 3 black SUVs had pulled up outside the building. Men in dark suits were climbing out, and even from 15 floors up, Caleb could see they weren't here for a friendly chat. "He found us," Jennifer said, peering over Caleb's shoulder. "That's Victor's private security." "How the hell did he find us?" Brenner had gone pale. "I'm so sorry. I have a security system in my office. It sends alerts to my phone. Victor he could have... It doesn't matter how," Caleb said, his mind already racing through options. "What matters is we need to get out of here now." "The email," Jennifer said, running back to her laptop. "I need 30 more seconds to finish the email and hit send. Once it's sent, even if they get the documents, it's too late. The FBI will have everything." Down on the street, the men were entering the building. Caleb could see them speaking to the security guard who was pointing toward the elevators. "Jennifer," he said urgently, "we don't have 30 seconds. 20 seconds, Jennifer said, her fingers flying. "I'm almost done. I just need to..." The elevator chimed in the hallway. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving fast. "Send it," Caleb shouted. "Send it now." Jennifer hit a key. They all heard the soft whoosh that meant the email was gone, winging its way through cyberspace to an FBI agent who might or might not check her email before Victor Harrington's men broke down this door. "Done," Jennifer said. "It's done. Now we..." The office door slammed open. 4 men in suits entered, and behind them, like a shark gliding through dark water, came Victor Harrington himself. He looked different from the polished CEO at the gala. His tie was loose, his hair slightly disheveled, and there was something wild in his eyes that Caleb had never seen before. This was Victor without his mask, without his careful performance of civility. This was a man backed into a corner, and that made him more dangerous than ever. "Isabella," Victor said, and his voice was soft, almost gentle. "Sweetheart, you've had us all so worried. Come here. Let's go home." Isabella had gone rigid in her chair, her hands clenched on the armrests. "No." "Isabella, I said no." Her voice was stronger now, clearer. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I know what you did. I know you killed my mother." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "You're confused, sweetheart. Traumatized. These people," he gestured at Caleb and Jennifer with contempt. "They've been filling your head with paranoid fantasies. They're using you, manipulating you for their own purposes." "Stop calling me sweetheart," Isabella said, and there was steel in her voice now. "Stop pretending you care about me. You've been lying to me for 10 years. You murdered my mother and made me think it was my fault. You kept me prisoner in that apartment, fed me pills to keep me docile, used me as a prop in your charity performances. And I'm done. I'm done believing your lies." The room was absolutely silent. Victor's men stood frozen by the door, uncertain how to handle this development. Maxwell Brenner had moved protectively closer to Isabella, his small frame nonetheless placing itself between her and her father. Victor looked at the document spread across Brenner's desk, at the scanner still humming, at Jennifer's laptop with its damning sent email confirmation on the screen. And Caleb watched as the CEO finally understood that he'd lost, that his carefully constructed empire was crumbling. But men like Victor Harrington didn't accept defeat gracefully. "You have no idea what you've done," he said, his voice gone cold and flat. "No idea what you've just destroyed. Everything I built, everything I created, all of it, gone, because of some sentimentality from a woman who couldn't understand that sometimes you have to make difficult choices." "Difficult choices?" Isabella's voice shook with rage. "You killed my mother. That's not a difficult choice. That's murder." "She was going to take everything," Victor said, and now the mask was completely gone, the monster beneath finally visible. "The company, the money, my reputation? She was going to drag my name through the mud over some minor financial irregularities, destroy everything I'd spent my life building. I gave her a choice. I told her we could work it out quietly, that we could reach an arrangement, but she refused. She said she was taking you and leaving, that she was going to the authorities no matter what I offered. She forced my hand." The confession hung in the air like poison gas. Even Victor's security men were staring at their boss with expressions of shock and dawning horror. "You're admitting it," Jennifer breathed, her hand slowly moving toward her phone. "You're actually admitting you killed her." Victor laughed, a sound without humor. "Why not? You've already sent your evidence to the FBI. My lawyers tell me I'm probably looking at charges regardless. At this point, what's one more confession?" He turned back to Isabella, and his voice softened, became almost pleading. "But Isabella, sweetheart, I did it for us. For you. Your mother was going to take you away from me. I couldn't let that happen. You're my daughter. Mine. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to keep you safe." "Safe?" Isabella stood, her whole body shaking. "You stole my sight. You stole 10 years of my life. You made me carry the guilt of killing my own mother. That's not protection. That's torture." "I gave you a comfortable life," Victor said, his voice rising. "Everything you needed. The best doctors, the best care." "A prison?" Isabella interrupted. "You gave me a luxurious prison, and you were my jailer." Caleb had been slowly edging toward Maya, trying to position himself between his daughter and Victor's men. But now he spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "It's over, Mr. Harrington. The evidence is out there. The FBI has it. You can't make this go away anymore." Victor turned to him, and the hatred in his eyes was pure and burning. "You, a janitor. You did this. You put these ideas in her head. You..." I asked her to dance, Caleb said simply. That's all. I treated her like a person. Apparently that was revolutionary enough to undo 10 years of your conditioning. For a moment, Caleb thought Victor might actually attack him. The CEO's hands clenched into fists, his face flushed with rage. But then one of his security men stepped forward, his voice uncertain. Mr. Harrington, we need to go. If the FBI has evidence, if they're opening an investigation, we need to get you to your lawyers. Now. Victor stood there for a long moment, staring at his daughter, at the documents on the desk, at the ruins of his carefully constructed life. Then he straightened his shoulders, adjusted his tie, and the mask slid back into place. Not completely, but enough. This isn't over, he said quietly. I have resources, connections, the best lawyers money can buy. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're up against. Maybe not, Isabella said, but at least I'm not alone anymore. At least I'm not living in the dark. She turned her face toward where she knew Caleb stood. Thank you for the dance, for asking, for seeing me when everyone else just saw my father's tragedy. Victor made a sound that might have been grief or might have been rage. Then he turned and walked out, his security men following behind him like the remnants of a defeated army. After they were gone, no one moved for a long moment. Then Jennifer exhaled shakily and sank into a chair. Did that really just happen? She said. Did Victor Harrington really just confess to murder in front of 6 witnesses? 7, Maya piped up. I was here too. 7 witnesses, Jennifer corrected. One of whom is a 12-year-old, which actually makes her testimony even more credible because kids are harder to discredit. Brenner was already on his phone calling someone. Yes, this is Maxwell Brenner. I need to speak to Detective Rivera immediately. It's an emergency. I have information about a murder. The Catherine Harrington case from 10 years ago. Yes, I'll hold. Isabella had sunk back into her chair, all the strength that had carried her through the confrontation draining away. She looked small and lost and utterly exhausted. Caleb moved to her side. You okay? I don't know, Isabella said. Ask me again when my father is in prison, and I can breathe without wondering if he's going to have me committed or drugged or locked away again. He won't, Caleb said with more certainty than he felt. He can't. Too many people know now. You're not alone anymore. Outside, dawn had fully broken over Manhattan. The city was waking up, going about its business, completely unaware that in a family lawyer's office on the 15th floor of a nondescript building, a 10-year-old murder had finally been exposed and an empire had begun to fall. Jennifer's phone rang. She answered, listened, and then her face broke into a smile. That was my FBI contact, she said. She got the email. She's already assembling a team. They're going to bring Victor in for questioning within the hour. She looked at Isabella. It's happening. It's really happening. Isabella nodded, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, Caleb thought, but something more complicated. Relief and grief and rage and hope all tangled together. Maya had moved to sit beside Isabella, her small hand finding the older woman's and holding tight. What happens now? Maya asked. After they arrest him, I mean. What happens to Isabella? It was the question none of them had really considered yet. Isabella had escaped to her father's apartment with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had no resources of her own, no friends outside her father's circle, no experience navigating the world independently. She'd traded one kind of prison for freedom, but what did freedom actually look like for a blind woman who'd been kept isolated for 10 years? I don't know, Isabella said quietly. I haven't thought that far ahead. I just wanted to stop him. I wanted the truth to come out. But after that, she laughed shakily. I have no idea how to actually live a life, how to be a person outside of my father's shadow. Then you learn, Caleb said, one step at a time, like dancing. You start with the basic steps and you build from there. And you're not alone, Maya added fiercely. You have us now, right, Dad? Caleb thought about his tiny apartment in Queens, about his janitor's salary, and his daughter's college fund that was barely a college envelope. He thought about how complicated and dangerous and absolutely insane it would be to get any more involved in Isabella Harrington's life than he already was. Then he thought about Sarah, about her unwavering belief that you helped people who needed help, that you did the right thing even when it was hard. Right, he said. You have us. The FBI moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours of Jennifer's email landing in Special Agent Monica Chen's inbox, federal agents had descended on Harrington Industries headquarters like avenging angels. Victor Harrington was taken into custody at 11:30 that morning, led out of his corner office in handcuffs, while his employees watched in stunned silence. The footage, captured by a dozen phone cameras and immediately uploaded to social media, went viral within minutes. Caleb watched it happen from Jennifer's apartment, where they'd retreated after leaving Maxwell Brenner's office. The lawyer had insisted they stay somewhere safe while the authorities processed everything, and Jennifer's cramped Hell's Kitchen walk-up had become an impromptu war room. Her laptop was open on the coffee table, streaming news coverage that had exploded across every major outlet. Breaking news this morning as Manhattan business titan Victor Harrington is arrested on charges of murder, embezzlement, fraud, and witness tampering, the anchor announced, her professional composure barely concealing her excitement. Sources say the charges stem from the death of his wife, Catherine Harrington, 10 years ago in what was previously believed to be a tragic accident. Isabella sat on Jennifer's couch, listening to the coverage through her phone's screen reader, her face unreadable. Maya was curled up beside her, having appointed herself as Isabella's personal guardian. Caleb stood by the window, watching the street below for any sign of trouble, his body still humming with adrenaline despite the fact that the immediate danger had passed. "They're calling it the trial of the century," Jennifer said, scanning her own laptop screen where a dozen tabs tracked different news sources. "Every outlet wants an exclusive with you, Isabella. CNN, NBC, The Times, everyone. Your story is not for sale," Isabella said quietly. "I don't want to be a spectacle. I've spent 10 years being my father's prop. I'm not going to become the media's property instead." Jennifer nodded, respect flickering across her face. "Fair enough. Though you should know the narrative is going to be written with or without your input. You might want some say in how your story gets told." "Eventually," Isabella said, "but not today. Today I just want to, She paused, seeming to search for words. "I don't even know what I want. To sleep, maybe. To process the fact that my father is actually in jail, to figure out what comes next." What came next arrived faster than any of them anticipated, in the form of a well-dressed woman in her 50s who knocked on Jennifer's door at 2 that afternoon. She introduced herself as Patricia Mills, a social worker with the Department of Family Services, and her presence made Caleb's stomach drop. "I'm here about Miss Harrington," Patricia said, her voice professionally neutral. Given the circumstances of her escape from her father's custody and the charges now pending against Mr. Harrington, the city has some concerns about her current living situation and support structure. "Concerns?" Isabella's voice was sharp. "What kind of concerns?" Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Miss Harrington, you're a blind woman who has lived under your father's care for the past 10 years. You have no independent housing, no source of income, limited mobility training, and by all accounts, minimal experience navigating daily life without assistance. The city wants to ensure you have appropriate support and resources." "She has support," Maya piped up. "She has us." Patricia looked at Maya, then at Caleb, then around Jennifer's tiny apartment with its mismatched furniture and stacks of papers. "And you are?" "Caleb Rowe. What was he exactly? A janitor who'd asked the wrong woman to dance?" "I'm a friend. A friend she's known for less than a week," Patricia said gently. "Mr. Rowe, I appreciate that you want to help, but Miss Harrington needs professional care, proper housing, access to services designed for people with her specific needs. The state can provide that. We have group homes, supported living facilities." "No," Isabella said, her voice going hard. "No facilities. No group homes. I just escaped from a prison disguised as a penthouse. I'm not trading one cage for another." "These aren't cages," Patricia said patiently. "They're supportive environments designed to help people with disabilities live independently while still having access to the resources they need." "How many of these group home residents are there by choice?" Isabella asked. "How many could leave if they wanted to? How many are there because their families decided they were too difficult to deal with, too expensive, too inconvenient?" Patricia's silence was answer enough. "I'm 24 years old," Isabella continued. "I'm blind, not incompetent. I have a trust fund from my mother that my father couldn't touch. Maxwell Brenner confirmed it this morning. Once the legal issues are settled, I'll have more than enough money to support myself. I just need time to figure things out. In the meantime, you need somewhere to stay, Patricia said. Somewhere appropriate. Mr. Rowe, I assume you have a one-bedroom apartment in Queens that you share with your daughter? Caleb felt heat rise in his face. Two-bedroom, actually. Small, but not appropriate for hosting a woman you barely know who requires significant daily assistance, Patricia finished. I'm not trying to be difficult, Mr. Rowe, but I have to consider Miss Harrington's best interests, and those interests aren't served by an unstable living situation with strangers. They're not strangers, Isabella said. They're the first people in 10 years who've treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be managed, and I'm not going to any facility. If you try to make me, I'll... She stopped, seeming to realize she had no leverage, no power. Please don't do this. The desperation in her voice broke Caleb's heart. He thought about Maya, about how fiercely he'd fight if anyone tried to take her away, to put her somewhere he couldn't protect her. Isabella had just escaped from one form of captivity. She couldn't be forced into another, no matter how well-intentioned. What if there was a middle ground? Jennifer said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I have a colleague, another journalist, who's been covering accessibility issues for years. She's blind herself, has been since birth. She runs a nonprofit that helps newly disabled people learn independent living skills, mobility training, adaptive technology, employment resources, all of it. What if Isabella stayed here with me temporarily while working with that organization? She'd have support, professional resources, but also autonomy. Would that satisfy your concerns? Patricia considered this, her expression thoughtful. Who's the colleague? Rebecca Saunders. She's been blind for 43 years, has a master's degree in social work, and has successfully helped hundreds of people transition to independent living. I can have her here in an hour if you want to meet her. I know Rebecca, Patricia said slowly. She's done good work. If she's willing to take on Miss Harrington's case, and if Miss Harrington has stable housing and appropriate supervision in the interim, she looked at Isabella. This is temporary, you understand, just until you're on your feet, able to demonstrate you can manage independently. The moment I have concerns about your safety or well-being, we'll revisit other options. I understand, Isabella said. Thank you so much. After Patricia left, promising to return the following day to check on the situation, Isabella sagged against the couch cushions like someone who'd been holding herself upright through sheer force of will. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry I'm such a burden. You've all done so much already, and now, Jennifer, you're stuck with me living in your apartment. Stop, Jennifer interrupted. You're not a burden. You're a person who's been through hell and needs some help getting back on her feet. There's no shame in that. And honestly, having you here gives me an excuse to clean this place up. My mother's been on my case for years about the mess. I don't have any of my things, Isabella said, a note of panic creeping into her voice. My clothes, my books, my adaptive equipment, it's all at my father's apartment, and I can't go back there. I can't. We'll get you new things, Caleb said. Whatever you need. And tomorrow, when things have calmed down a bit, we can have the police escort us to collect your belongings. Your father's in custody. He can't stop you from taking what's yours. I can take you shopping, Maya offered. I'm really good at shopping. Mom always said I could find a bargain in a department store blackout. Despite everything, Isabella smiled. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, I have no idea what's in style anymore. The last time I picked out my own clothes, I was 14. We'll figure it out, Maya said confidently. First step, no more sad rich girl dresses. You need jeans, lots of jeans, and hoodies. Everyone needs hoodies. The conversation dissolved into the mundane details of daily life. What size clothes Isabella wore, whether she preferred coffee or tea, if she had any food allergies. It was almost aggressively normal, this discussion of practical needs. But Caleb understood what they were all doing. They were grounding themselves in the ordinary, the manageable, the small tasks that made life feel real and survivable after the chaos of the morning. Rebecca Saunders arrived an hour later, a compact woman in her 60s with silver hair and a white cane that she wielded with the confidence of someone who'd been navigating the world blind for longer than Isabella had been alive. Her guide dog, a dignified golden retriever named Atlas, settled immediately at her feet when she sat down. So, Rebecca said after Jennifer had made introductions. I understand you've had quite a week. Isabella laughed shakily. That's one way to put it. Tell me what you need, Rebecca said simply. Not what other people think you need, what you actually want for yourself right now. The question seemed to catch Isabella off guard. She sat silently for a long moment, her fingers twisting in her lap. I want to feel safe, she said finally. I want to stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for my father to show up and drag me back. I want to learn how to do things for myself, cook, clean, navigate the city, all the basic life skills I should have learned years ago but didn't because he kept me so isolated. And I want... She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I want to remember what it feels like to be happy. Real happiness, not just the absence of fear. Is that too much to ask for? Not at all, Rebecca said warmly. Those are completely reasonable goals, and they're all achievable with time and work. The safety part might take a while. Trauma doesn't heal overnight, but the rest? The independence, the skills, the possibility of happiness? We can start working on those immediately. How? Isabella asked. I've been blind for 10 years, and I still can't do basic things without help. I can't cook. I can barely navigate my own apartment. How am I supposed to function in the real world? Because for 10 years you weren't allowed to learn, Rebecca said matter-of-factly. Your father kept you dependent deliberately. That's not the same as being incapable. With proper training, adaptive equipment, and practice, you'll be amazed what you can do. I've seen it happen hundreds of times. People who've been blind their whole lives, or for decades, who thought they'd never be independent, who learned to thrive. You're no different. You're just starting later than most. Where do we start? Isabella asked, and there was something new in her voice now. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. Possibility, maybe, or determination. We start small, Rebecca said. Tomorrow we work on navigating Jennifer's apartment safely. We establish landmarks, create mental maps, practice moving through the space with confidence. Then we move to the building, then the block, then the neighborhood. Each day we expand your world a little bit more. We also start orientation and mobility training with a cane. Yours is a basic one. We'll get you fitted with something better. And we work on daily living skills, cooking, cleaning, managing technology, all of it. That sounds like a lot, Isabella said. It is, Rebecca agreed. But you don't have to do it all at once. We take it step by step, day by day. Some days will be good. Some days you'll want to give up. That's normal. The important thing is that you keep moving forward even when it's hard. Can you do that? Isabella was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. Yes, I think I can. Good, Rebecca said. Then we start tomorrow morning. 9 a.m., be ready to work. And Isabella? One more thing. You're going to fail sometimes. You're going to drop things and trip over furniture and get lost and frustrated. That's part of the process. Don't let your father's voice in your head tell you that failure means you're helpless. Failure means you're learning. Remember that. After Rebecca left, promising to return the next morning with training materials and equipment, the apartment fell into a comfortable quiet. Maya had fallen asleep on the couch, her head on Isabella's shoulder, her purple wig askew. Caleb stood by the window, watching the afternoon fade into evening, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. Caleb? Isabella's voice was soft, careful not to wake Maya. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you help me? Really, you barely knew me. You had so much to lose. Your job, your safety, Maya's safety. Why did you risk all that for a stranger? Caleb thought about his answer carefully. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was brutal watching her slip away piece by piece. But even at the end, even when she was so weak she could barely lift her head, she was still herself. Still fierce, still fighting. And one of the last things she said to me was that she didn't want Maya to grow up in a world where people looked away when someone needed help. She said that kindness was the only thing that mattered in the end, that everything else, money, status, success, it was all meaningless if you didn't use it to help other people. He turned to look at Isabella, at this woman who'd had the courage to escape a prison disguised as luxury, who'd been brave enough to seek help from a stranger in the middle of the night. When I saw you at that gala, sitting alone while everyone else danced, I saw someone who needed help. and I heard Sarah's voice in my head asking me what I was going to do about it. So I asked you to dance. And then you called and asked for more help. And I had the same choice. Look away or step forward. Sarah would have stepped forward every time, so I did too. That's all. That's not all, Isabella said quietly. That's everything. You gave me my life back. I can never repay that. I don't want repayment, Caleb said. I just want you to be okay. To have the chance to figure out who you are when you're not living in your father's shadow. That's enough. The trial began 6 months later, in early autumn, when the leaves in Central Park were just beginning to turn. By then, Isabella had moved into her own apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn with wide hallways and tactile landmarks that Rebecca had helped her choose. She'd completed intensive mobility training and could navigate her neighborhood with confidence. She'd learned to cook simple meals, to manage her own schedule, to use adaptive technology that gave her independence her father had spent a decade denying her. She'd also, with Maya's enthusiastic assistance, developed a personal style that had nothing to do with the elegant, expensive clothes her father had dressed her in. Jeans and hoodies, just as Maya had prescribed, along with comfortable boots and a leather jacket that made her feel, she told Caleb once, like someone who could handle whatever life threw at her. The prosecution's case against Victor Harrington was overwhelming. Catherine's documents provided evidence of massive financial fraud. Maxwell Brenner's sealed envelope contained her affidavit detailing her fears. Forensic analysts had finally been allowed to examine the crash site and the vehicle. Victor had indeed kept the car, stored in a private warehouse, another prop in his tragedy narrative, and found evidence of driver-side interference with the steering mechanism consistent with Isabella's recovered memories. And then there was Isabella's testimony. She took the stand on a crisp October morning, wearing a simple black dress and her mother's pearl necklace, one of the few items she'd retrieved from the penthouse. Maya sat in the gallery between Caleb and Jennifer, gripping both their hands as Isabella was sworn in. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diane Foster, walked Isabella through her story with gentle precision. The night of the accident, her memories of her parents fighting, the sound of the music, her father's hand on the wheel, the decade of isolation and medication and guilt that followed. Victor's